Welcome back to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're taking a plunge into a really interesting concept, public learning, and specifically how it champions valuing teacher voices. Our mission here is to unpack the core ideas, the practical stuff, and maybe some surprising insights from the research behind this approach to professional development in education.
Right. And what's really interesting here is that public learning, it's more than just PD. It's actually a pretty powerful framework for building up equity and professional capacity in schools. And the ultimate goal, really, is making a big difference in student learning outcomes. It's kind of systemic change driven by growth.
Okay, so diving in then, the heart of it seems to be this idea of mobilizing a pedagogy of voice for educators.
Mhm.
What does that actually mean, giving teachers a public voice, and what does that unlock?
Well, it unlocks huge possibilities for growth and, really importantly, for equity. Take Maria, a ninth grade teacher from the source material. She did this public learning thing, recording her conversations with students about writing. Her goal was, help them write better.
Mm.
But what she found, kind of surprisingly, was her own unconscious bias in those chats.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she realized her approach was sort of, as the source puts it, stripping emerging writers of their voice and agency.
Mm.
But because she made that struggle public, listened back, asked, what can I do differently? She completely transformed her practice, made it much more equitable. It really shows how public learning lets people reflect, adapt, and get better, like right there in the moment.
That is a powerful story. So it sounds like public learning works in maybe two main ways. First, it's a process for grappling with complexity, right? Deepening understanding. Learning happens for students and for the adults collaborating. And second, it's a catalyst maybe for changing the whole professional culture, putting student voice and teacher curiosity right at the center.
Exactly. Which, makes you wonder, what are the principles behind this? Why does it work? A core one is symmetry. Think about it like this. The roles of teacher and learner aren't fixed. They flow back and forth. Educators aren't just giving knowledge, they're actively getting it too, from students, from each other. It's real reciprocal learning.
Flipping the script on hierarchy.
Totally. And interestingly, neuroscience kind of backs this up. It highlights how important curiosity and engagement are for everyone involved, adults and kids.
That neuroscience link is fascinating. So our brains are wired for this kind of give and take. And building on that, agency seems vital for any real change. Public learning encourages critical thinking, right? Pushing educators to question assumptions, consider other viewpoints. It's not just about fixing your own practice. It's like empowering everyone to challenge the status quo.
Exactly. And a really key outcome when this all clicks is developing adaptive expertise, which is really different from what they call routine expertise. That's just, applying skills without really thinking, doing it because that's how it's always done.
Right, the autopilot mode.
Yeah. Adaptive expertise, though, that's about being able to flexibly pull up, organize, and use your professional knowledge. It's about spotting new problems and knowing when and how to seek out better solutions. This is where public learning really helps educators break free from those stagnant cultures. You hear things like, everyone's teaching practice is privatized, or we just don't have time to learn. Public learning pushes against that isolation.
So what this means for an educator then? It's not just about being good at your job. It's about becoming like a learning detective, always questioning, adapting, innovating, moving from just doing the work to actively shaping it. It's about wanting to constantly improve, not just staying in your own lane, but creating this dynamic shared learning space.
Precisely. And you can see this working in practice with something called the fishbowl style. Basically, you have a small group of educators discussing a challenge, maybe looking at some student work or data while others watch. It creates this meta moment, as the source calls it, for reflection. The observers are tuning into how the conversation is happening, not just what's being said.
Okay, a meta moment. So give us an example. How does that play out?
Well, the source talks about Sam, Kendrick, and Cheryl, three computer science teachers. They're looking at a student's problem-solving approach. Sam actually brings a video of him talking with two students, Murtley and Alex. And during the fishbowl discussion, Sam says pretty openly that he thinks he messed up. He spent more time with Alex, knew how to fix Alex's issue, and admitted. So I turned the recording off and just said, go fix it.
Wow, that's really vulnerable, admitting a misstep like that publicly. What do you think is the biggest hurdle for teachers to get to that point?
That's a really good question. In Sam's example, it just perfectly shows the core of public learning. building that mutual responsibility and trust. His willingness to be open about his struggle, that builds trust. It also connects really nicely to ideas in culturally responsive teaching, helping students become independent learners.
Hmm.
Public learning lets educators wrestle with these things productively.
Right, so it's not just about Sam feeling bad, it's about digging deeper. And that meta moment for the observers and the chat afterwards that helps everyone see maybe their own biases makes the learning visible. It's asking, what were we thinking that made this a learning moment? It shows how it works, not just that it works, which leads us to that framework you mentioned, the 5 elements.
Yes, exactly. These 5 elements give structure to these public learning conversations. First, begin with curiosity. Really genuinely wanting to know about the student experience, not assuming you already know. Like Jamie, an SEL teacher in the research, she recorded students reading because she was truly curious, not just checking a box.
Yeah. Okay, start with curiosity. Makes sense. But is it hard for teachers to find that genuine curiosity when they're just, swamped?
That's a fair point, and that's why the second element is key. Uncover student experience, usually using actual data, like video. Concrete evidence helps move past assumptions. Jamie and her colleague Ija used video of Jamie with a student to really see what was happening for that student. The data guided their curiosity.
Okay, so data helps focus the curiosity. What's next?
Third, build space for sense-making and challenging bias. This is where you really acknowledge complexity and, importantly, your own potential biases. In Jamie's case, Ija helped her think about modeling a strategy. And Jamie openly said she didn't really know how to do that well. That honesty, that not knowing, opened up space for new learning. It shows admitting you don't know is actually a strength here.
Huh. Okay, saying I don't know is okay. That's a big cultural shift for a lot of workplaces, not just schools.
It absolutely is. Then fourth, acknowledge that learning is social and emotional. This means reflecting explicitly on the social-emotional skills being used in the conversation itself. It reinforces that learning, for adults too, is deeply social and emotional. Jamie and Ija talked about the perspective-taking and empathy they used, making the process part of the learning.
Got it. And the last one.
Finally, value the learning at a systems level. The insights aren't just for that one conversation. They feed back into broader strategy for the department or the whole school. Like Principal Julie in the research, using survey data maps to guide her talks with teachers. It shifts from just checking boxes to addressing real needs identified through this public process. It becomes a loop.
Right, so it connects individual learning back to the bigger picture. Okay, so if a school or a district wants to move towards this, from, say, a culture of just compliance to this culture of public learning, how do they even start? It sounds like a big shift.
It is a big shift, but definitely rewarding. The research offers some concrete steps. One practical thing is doing a collaborative time audit, like really looking at how meeting time is currently used. Is it just logistics, or is real learning happening?
Finding the time or making the time?
Exactly. Another step is to provide teachers a model. Show them what public learning actually looks like. Maybe videos of students collaborating, or even recordings of these adult learning sessions. And maybe most critically, leaders need to go public with their own learning. When leaders model vulnerability, talk about their own dilemmas or things they're figuring out, it creates safety for others. Imagine the impact of that.
Yeah, a principal saying, I'm wrestling with this too. That's huge. But it sounds like there are some important warnings too. Caveats. The source mentions the magic in the mindset, transforming the culture, but also stresses that public learning can't just be one more thing piled onto teachers. It needs to be genuinely transformative.
Absolutely critical. And tied to that, it needs to be clear, this is a learning practice, not an accountability tool. The goal is shared understanding and growth, not judging performance. And lastly, a really important point. Safety in public learning is not equally accessible to all people. Leaders have to be constantly mindful of power dynamics and equity issues. They need to actively work to ensure everyone feels truly safe enough to be vulnerable. That's ongoing work.
That's a crucial reminder about equity. This whole deep dive really brings home the power of public learning, doesn't it? Valuing teacher voices, changing the whole environment, it fosters curiosity, agency, deep understanding, moving beyond teachers working alone in their rooms.
It really does. And maybe the final thought for you listening is this. Think about these principles of public learning, starting with curiosity, valuing different voices, being willing to be vulnerable, building understanding together. How could you apply those ideas in your own life? At work, maybe in personal growth, or even in your community, it's much bigger than just the classroom. What questions does this deep dive raise for you about making your learning, whatever it is, a bit more public?